happy Father's Day. Oh, yeah, that thing. Thanks, Wade.
Happy Father's Day, everyone.
So I want to start off by saying Happy Father's Day.
You want one, Ruby? Do you want an almond?
And I was wondering if you could take a moment, and I know that some Father's Day can be rough for some of us, like whether we never really had a relationship with our father or whether we've lost our fathers. So I thought we could just take a moment to honor the different types of losses, take a moment of silence, I guess, before heading into the discussion. So yeah, let's just take a few moments to just mourn the fathers who aren't able to join us today. Okay. Well, thank you all for that moment. So on Mother's Day, we had talked about mothering relationships that have brought us peace or might have actually brought us strife or distress. And as I said then, I'll use the same topic for Father's Day. So yeah, how are ways that father and father relationships, fatherly relationships have brought peace and wholeness into your lives?
Would you like my answer that says I have no idea what that is?
I was gonna go with the positive first and then be like, what's our experience with father relationships that may have not brought peace or restoration or wholeness. So I was hoping to start on the positive note, but
that's what I figured. That's why I wasn't responding.
Yeah, but y'all ain't cooperating.
Well, I can love on my dad. So my dad was a teacher, a science teacher, for all of his career. And so number one, that meant that we had the summers off together, because he chose to live on a public teacher's salary and not supplement it by working over the summer, which a lot of teachers actually had to do. And so that meant that every summer we would go off and usually go for 2 weeks to the Smoky Mountains. His family was all from Tennessee. So we would go there usually for 2 weeks and a week at East Harbor State Park, and then a longer vacation. Just staying, we tent camped. Eventually we got a pop-up canvas camper. And so we stayed at basically national and state parks because they were cheap. And that's how we could afford to spend the summer traveling around. KOA was out of our budget. So occasionally we'd spend a night at a KOA if they had a pool, but so, he really, both he and my mom, really made that time special for me and my sister, to have the summers together. He was always teaching, so in addition to being a teacher, he was a volunteer with the local metro parks and taught me all about nature and science. So probably why I'm a science librarian is because of him. Because I went to college and I didn't know whether I wanted to major in biology or chemistry or what, just because he taught those things, mostly biology though. So so he taught me a lot in that way. And he taught me just about being someone who had loyalty, who looked out for others. He was very um, he was very careful with the family's money, um, and used it very wisely. I think I inherited too much of that from him, in the sense that like once when I was little, or when I was probably a tween or a teen, and I needed a new bike, and so I'd figured out how many weeks worth of allowance it would take to buy a new bike, and it was basically a year. And he pointed out to me that I had money in the bank because I would put any money I received for Christmas or my birthday into the bank, and I didn't realize you could take money out of the bank. So because he was like, you have enough money to buy a bike if you want. And I hadn't realized that the banks worked both ways, that you could put money in and take them out. But so eventually I learned that, but I probably still then spent the next 12 months trying to replace that money in the bank with what I had spent on the bike. But so anyway, I really appreciate my dad even more now that my mom is gone. And so, yeah.
Wait, those sound like some badass summers. So like, I mean, very happy you did that, and also super jealous. Like, man, that's awesome. You're like, oh, we'd spend 2 weeks and then we'd go on a longer vacation. I'm like, 2 weeks and you go on longer ones. But like, man. So
It's funny, when I first met Mitch at Food for Thought, he so much reminded me of a young version of my dad, just because of kind of Mitch's values and also his knowledge, and the biology zoology thing. And so, but my dad always had a beard and a mustache, and then the one time he shaved it off, it freaked us all out. So but never sported a mustache as nice as Mitch's. So.
That's an honor. I'm not often compared with other people's dads. So thank you, Wade.
I'll go. My dad actually taught me what agape was without saying it. Like, I didn't know what agape, like what the word meant, but he would always like give and not make a big deal out of it. And that, because when we found out like how much he gave all the time, post-human, after he died, when we found out how much he gave to so many places without anybody even knowing about it, and without getting anything in return, it was like, just, we're like, wow, that's, because you don't really think about that if you're not looking for it, if that makes sense. But like I've tried to do that, but a lot of times when I do something like that, I try to make a deal of it. Like, for instance, the lunches that I did, I would have to put them on Facebook so people would know to come. But I like to try to do things stealth, just to try to do kind of like what he did. And he also taught me, and this is like one of the fondest memories, when I didn't know, when I was a kid, I was like, I didn't know what Good Friday was. I think I talked about this before, but and I remember what the scene was in the house, because the sun was shining in a specific way through the house, and I still live in a house. So every time that sun is shining a certain way in through the house, I think of when he told me why it's called Good Friday, because I was like, why is it called Good Friday if they killed him and stuff? And he told me about it, and that was the first time I ever learned about it. So that was a long rambling way of saying I miss my dad. And I'm sad that I'll never get to be a dad, because I always wanted to be someone else's like kid's dad, but that's out of the cards right now. So I'm jealous of all you guys who get to be dads.
So, Craig, I got married when I was 48. So let's not say out of the cards.
You didn't have congestive heart failure at 42, dude.
No, just diabetes and high blood pressure. And
Does anyone have any other positive memories of their fathers they want to share, ways that their fathers brought peace and restoration and into their lives? Okay. We want to go on to, and I mean, this does not have to be fathers only. It can be fatherly figures, we talked about that on Mother's Day. Like sometimes people act as fathers to us. So I just want to say it's pretty cute seeing Ruby and David kind of coupled together on Father's Day. So, okay. So does anyone feel like sharing not so great father stories, like ways that fathers have not brought peace and restoration into our lives and how we have handled that? Okay, I guess maybe I'll share a bit. So my relationship with my dad's been pretty turbulent through most of my life. I'm not really sure that's even the right word, because my dad didn't speak to me for 10 years. So that's, a good, how turbulent can it be when there's not a relationship? But, yeah, I don't know. I talked more about my mom on Mother's Day, but I feel like I don't have much to say about my dad. And we've been getting along better this past year. So if you remember, last September, I went to Long Island for my friend's wedding. I ended up getting breakfast with my dad. And then a few weeks later, we ended up both in Florida because his mother was declining and ended up passing away. And yeah, so this is like, I was kind of in touch with my father a little bit last year, but this is gonna be the second Father's Day, and like since I've been 21, so like second Father's Day in like 12 years that I'm actually in touch with my dad. So today will be different. Yeah, and I think at least when it comes to Christianity and my faith journey, that I've really had to work at what do I imagine a father being like, and how do I prevent myself from projecting my experiences with fathers onto this image of God the Father. I think part of me has kind of enjoyed moving away from God the Father and God as being portrayed masculinely to more gender neutral, because then it's helps me not project and confuse relationships. Yeah. One second. I don't know, like, I know this is a weird question to ask, but do any of you have questions for me, about how I view fathers or have fatherly relationships? Like, I feel like that would be easier. And, like, even when things were rough with my dad, like, in some ways I was still thankful for him. Like, so my dad and I were born in the same town. Like, I grew up in the same town he did. We were born in the same hospital. I grew up going to the church that he went to as a kid. So, I forgot where I was going with that. And it was very weird because, like, so I can more distinctly remember Mother's Day or experiencing Mother's Day as a, throughout my church experiences. I guess that's because, that was going to be the role I would grow up to. And so Father's Day was just like so. But like at some point in my childhood, my dad kind of stopped going to church with us. And before that, he'd been pretty involved. And then I'm not sure what happened. But, yeah, I'm trying to remember how I felt about Father's Day and growing up in church, and I can't remember. Like, was I like, oh yeah, this is, celebrating Father's Day in my church with my dad, who celebrated Father's Day in this church with his dad, or was I like, oh, my dad, who also went to this church, is no longer here, and here I am celebrating Father's Day, and my dad's not in church. And I mean, I know there were several of those, but yeah. Okay. Well, that's my little father spiel. Does anyone else want to share anything not so great about fathers? I know DeJuan has commented in the chat section if you want to look there. Yeah. And I think we've seen this with both mothers and fathers and sometimes they can be good examples of what not to be. And like my aunt talks about that. Like she saw her parents' relationship and how her family was, and she was like, that's not how I wanted. Like my grandparents didn't get along. Like they ended up getting divorced when my dad was in high school. Right, and my aunt being my dad's sister. And she's like, we weren't very affectionate. Like, we didn't tell each other we loved them. There was, a lot of critiquing. She's like, I knew that was not the type of family I wanted to create. So she, so her, like, her and her kids are, like, very close physically. Like, they're, always hugging and, they talk every day. She, like, her kids talk to her almost every day. And, yeah. So, and, like, so is there anything else anyone wants to share about fathers? Maybe how they relate to God as a father. I could, talk about this week's portion. I do have that as a backup in case we're, exhausted with talking about fathers.
I don't mean to leave you hanging, Lee. I feel like I just have very little to offer. I feel like my experience with my father was pretty pedestrian and yeah, like just pretty normal. We didn't go to church, so there was no like likening my father to God the Father or anything like that. And then even after I did start exploring my faith, I thought, okay, like, yeah, that sounds fine. Like I just was pretty neutral about it all. My parents did divorce when I was 5, and I did actually go to live with my father. So I would say probably the best thing was that my dad, because at first my dad was driving me in the mornings to my grandma's house and dropping me off there every morning when I was in first grade, because he had to be at work really, really early. And at some point he decided, instead of waking up a 6-year-old at 5:30 in the morning or 5 or whatever time it was. It was so early that that he would just let me stay at my grandma's throughout the week. And then on Fridays, he came for dinner every night. I just didn't drive home with him so I could like sleep a whole night's sleep. And I think now, like, as a parent, I think like I have mixed feelings about it. Like mostly I think it was probably somewhat of a sacrifice, but at the same time I think he felt ease of mind, like it was his mom who was taking care of me, where I got to sleep at her house. But as a parent, I feel like there's a certain comfort in having your kids tucked into the bed, in the same house you're in. So I can kind of see that as being probably kind of weird for my dad. But I'm thankful for it because I think it would have been more stressful on me to try to do it for 5 years every single morning, waking up at 4:30 or 5 or whatever time it was. It's silly. Yeah. And as far as David goes, the other father in my life, I feel like it was rocky. It was rocky early on, but I don't have a lot to compare it to because I don't see into other people's households, but I just know that he has worked really hard to try to be the best person he can be and the best father he can be. So to see the amount of work he's put in has been like inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way does. I was trying to think so hard on some memories that I could share about, but I really don't remember much. And I could relate to what Lee was sharing, and to kind of talk about what Dewan shared. From what I do remember and how I put it into the way I parent now, I just remember what I saw, and I remember what I didn't want to be like. I remember what I didn't want to bring along. And you know what I'm saying? And just the fact that no one has anything to share, it kind of lets me know that I'm human, or me and Tiffany are human, because like a lot of stuff that we go through with our families, I call it Black people problems. I say, like, nobody in the church don't go through this. They're all perfect. They have perfect families and whatnot. I guess I just put everyone on a pedestal just because of how shitty our lives are. Although we know we have you guys, and like you guys are all we have, and we all attach quickly because we don't have no one else. So yeah, that's all I want to share about that. So basically, I didn't have like a good father or father figure, but I did see some stuff. And when I got older, I said, okay, well, that's not what I want to do, because I know it wasn't right then. So why bring it along? And I don't know, maybe just watching certain movies and seeing certain stuff, I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that. So I just follow my heart and try to be the best father figure I can be. And father. It sounds wrong with my voice. I don't know what's wrong with it.
One of the things that I thought about when I was reading and studying a lot of the Old Testament, especially in the Kings and Chronicles and stuff, was how it seemed like every generation it was like, then they did good under this guy, and then they did evil under this guy, and then it just, even though they had, like, they were in the same lineage, it just kept shifting, like, from one generation to the next. And I'm like, I find it interesting that like a kid from this family with this bad, I don't want to throw the word evil around, but bad leader, dad, produced this good kid that did these great things. And that the kid then had a son who did went the other way.
I get it.
It's really weird to me. I mean, it's not weird, but it's interesting, I guess, to see that you're not who raised you at all, and you're not who your kid is at all. I don't know if that means anything. I'm just, it's just something I thought was, because when you're studying straight through like that, and writing, and it seems like, why did this happen if the dad was so good, or why did this happen, because the dad was so bad? Like, well, how did this kid come out of that? And it's just one of the, I guess everyone's individual, and you don't become your father, you don't become your mother. It's just like, that it basically flies in the face of the apple falls far from the tree. It's just like, that's not how it goes. You're an individual, you can make your own choices, and clearly these people did, and they turned it around, whether for good or for bad. So you get to make your own decisions, and then choose how to influence other people in your own little kingdom. Yes.
The example I was thinking when you were saying that, to try to relate it to a little bit what I was talking about, like the example I was thinking is like, just because someone may have birthed you, it isn't your destiny to be how they were. And you're able to like create your own destiny. You don't have to be like your birther. Like, just because they were a certain way don't mean you have to be that way.
Thank you for your all's contributions, and just yeah, Craig, that was really insightful. And I think there's some stuff in like the commentaries and the Mishnah that kind of deal with that, about sons following or not, these end up turning towards evil. That part of what the part of what Judaism says about that is that, like, yeah, like, we are all our own people, and that even if, as a parent, we teach our children to do well, and even if we are great shining examples and teach them right, that doesn't mean we are still not in control, and they are still individuals that can do and make choices however they choose, whether to follow what they were taught or not. Yeah.
It makes sense when you think of how many great people that had really shitty parents.
He's talking about you, Don. Yeah, I find the whole topic of parents to be very interesting, right? And this pops into my head right now, but it makes me think of that story about the blind man and the disciples going, Jesus, is it because of him or his parents? And like, are we punished for our parents? And do we, in some ways, are we punished by the parents we have? Like, is it some sort of punishment that we have who we have as parents? I think the answer to that is no. Like, it's just in some ways randomness, but yeah. And just something I've always thought, even as a kid, is that while I was not blessed with great parents, bye Don. Something I think really helped me throughout childhood, and just something I've been blessed with throughout life, is having incredible friends. And friends that are supportive and give me that family I'm looking for. And even in some ways, having friends whose parents are willing to be quasi-parents to me. So, and I've known sometimes in searching for, like, I have, whether intentionally or not, kind of searched for replacements to my parents, and sometimes that ends up being very harmful in ways I didn't expect. But yeah, parenting is, or parent-child relationships are very confusing, and do not have a child of my own, and never really wanted kids because I was always afraid of like how I would mess them up the way my parents messed me up, and now I just realize I don't want to put in that effort because I enjoy my life how it is being childless. But yeah, okay. And now that Don's gone, I don't feel bad about wrapping up early if we all feel like that, since I'm running out of talk. And I meant to say this while Don was still here, and I apologize for not doing it in his presence, but I do want to apologize to all of you for my conduct towards Don last week. I did not mean to be dishonoring towards him about the questions and sometimes feeling like he was taking over. I was trying to, I guess, express some of my own insecurity, and I am appreciative for Don's contributions every Sunday, and I am appreciative for his wisdom and guidance and contributions to the conversation. And usually, most of the time, I'm very grateful for his questions, except when they're very hard and unexpected, like last week, and I feel a little uncomfortable. And I'm sorry that I did not intend to be dishonoring to Don. I just want to apologize to everyone that I did that in front of you. Yeah. So I guess here's a question I have about parents. So in the idea that we should honor our parents. So what does that look like when we have, and this might have been better when Don was here, what does that look like when we have difficult relationships with our parents? How do we honor our mothers and fathers when those relationships are harmful? It's not a question I have an answer to. It's a question I ask myself a ton. So I'm hoping y'all can share some of your wisdom and insight to help me.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of like you can honor them for what is honorable, but that doesn't mean that honor isn't some way earned. And so I think honor your father and mother is based on the presumption that they are honorable and caring. Sometimes we honor their lessons by, as Dewan said, by looking to them and taking what you can out of it. Sometimes it's sometimes you can honor them by imitating them, and sometimes the best way to honor the lessons that they've taught you is to say, I know enough to know what to imitate and what not to. And I know that it's not all about do we grow up to be like them, or do we, honoring is not imitation, but I think when we talk about I guess when we talk about children, we talk about them not necessarily about how they honor their parents, but how they grow up themselves. And so I think bringing honor to your family is being the best person that you can be. And if that reflects back on a bad parent, if only by contrast, you've honored their name by being you and not necessarily by being them. So.
One thing that came to the forefront for me and my dad passed away 4 years ago at 94. And my dad and I didn't have the perfect relationship, but I felt like as an adult, we were able to forgive each other's past. There wasn't a time where Dad and I didn't say we loved each other when we parted each other. I felt like we came a long way in our relationship from when I was a young man to when I was a older adult. But I had the privilege of eulogizing my dad at his funeral, and I knew I was going to do that even before anybody asked me to do it. And one of the things that came to the forefront for me is I was looking at some old photographs of my mom and dad, particularly when they were young, like in their 20s. They had my oldest brother in the picture. He was probably a year old. Dad had come back from war in World War II. And one thing that dawned on me as I was like looking at that picture is that as a young couple, the world's ahead of you, life is ahead of you, everything is just, for the most part, looking at my mom and dad, it was just lots to look forward to. Dad's home from war, all the horrors of that experience. And just realizing that my mom and dad are a product of a lot of those different experiences and having grace for them. So like Dad going to war, I had an older brother that died at 5 days old in the crib. That's going to take a toll. Difficult children and raising 5 kids, trying to manage a career, providing for your family. All of those are incredible challenges that none of us ever face, ever. Our parents face them, but we never face them. And so trying to negotiate all of those things in life, some of us do a better job than others for inexplicable reasons. And I think that was really important for me to recognize that in my dad and my mom, and giving them grace because they never had done it before, and none of us ever do it. With every child, you're a first-time parent in reality because kids are different. Can't apply the same rules when I was raising Phil over when I was raising Aaron. 2 different kids, 2 different sets of circumstances. And I forgot that with Dad, or I didn't realize it. Like I said, maybe it was kind of late in the game to recognize it when I was preparing the eulogy for my dad. But I think it was an important thing for me to recognize. My dad was kind of a cantankerous guy. I have some funny stories about that kind of cantankerous personality, but sometimes it wore on the kids, obviously. But I've never been to war, never was away from my wife for 4 years. My child, who never knew me until I got home and had a 3-year-old at home, and never saw the child until the day I stepped into the house and he was 3 years old. Never had to experience any of that stuff. So, we're products of all of that stuff. We all venture into that arena for the first time, though our parents and our family may prepare us in some way, never can fully prepare us for what we face as moms and dads. So it's given me, like I said, kind of in summary, it's given me a lot to let go of with my dad. He did the best he could under the circumstances. And they were difficult circumstances for sure. Really difficult circumstances for my mom and dad. particularly in their young marriage. So anyway, I thought that was, I wanted to share that with you guys.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Mitch. That was, I think that's something that's difficult to realize about our parents and about ourselves and even the people we see every day, is that we all do the best we can, you know, and yeah. And I think, I know my parents did the best they can, especially my mom. And I guess to just push back on a little bit, something I think that would have helped a lot with my relationships with my parents is if they had been like, kind of acknowledged that they're sometimes the best they can do still falls short, like, which is painful. Or I don't know, but I'm getting very contemplative now. So we'll just, if you're all okay, I think we'll just I think we'll just wrap up. Is there any last thoughts that anyone would like to share? Okay. Okay, then let's move on to prayer requests then.